Ooh, there it is. What the fuck? Hey, how's it going, guys? Sorry for having my head down a little bit after the holidays, and also at the moment because I'm doing. If you missed the announcement of Rift Relapse, I'm doing a month-long League of Legends streaming event that is going to be wrapping up this week, and it's League of Legends, so it's a little hit or miss. But if you've been watching that, I appreciate you guys watching that, and also just any of the stuff I've been throwing up on the YouTube side of things over the past year. It's been nice to get back to doing more video, like, on-demand kind of content that you don't really have to, like, worry about when I'm streaming or whatever. But if you're watching either streams or YouTube or anything of the sort, anything I'm doing, just thank you a lot for that. I appreciate that. Anyway, I'm here today because I want to start to get into doing more edited style discussion videos. Let's like stream highlights. I do tend to do like these streams where I just like yap for a fucking hour about a game or like announcements going on or anything like that. But I wanted to start doing more stuff like that because it's stuff that I'm very much interested in. And I have the perfect game to discuss right now because just over the last weekend, it dropped not only new gameplay footage, but also a lot of new details about the newest Doom game coming out, Doom the Dark Ages, which, I mean, fan of both Dooms, obviously, so... yeah, I'm really excited for this one. It looks really cool. I'm interested in a lot in people's reactions to it, because it seems like a lot of people don't really understand why this is the direction they're going. But for me, it's really exciting, because I feel like this game in particular is like going to be a really good jumping on point if you've been missing a lot of like Doom action the past couple of years. And it's definitely addressing like a lot of concerns that I had with Eternal, and a lot of like concerns I think a lot of like die-hard Doom fans, like the really classic Dooms, have been having with the new direction of the new Doom games. So I wanted to get on, talk a little bit about the recent reveals and some of the details we can see in the trailer, but also kind of get into why this is the direction they're going with this new Doom game, and why I think that it's really exciting to both really old players, new players that kind of bounced off Eternal after playing 2016. So to start, I want to talk a little bit about Doom Eternal, especially after 2016, because, I mean, the story goes, Doom after Doom 3 is in a very confused state. It's the beginning of the very large jump in popularity of Call of Duty, military shooters in general, like a lot of like very realistic, less Doom like FPSs that were coming out. You had games move away from having just an entire like arsenal, like 8-gun arsenal, to like something more realistic of like you just have 2 guns, very realistic like accuracy-based shooting, cover shooting, all that stuff. Really moving away from the more arcadey style that the original Doom games had, and others sought to copy after the success of it. So they went back to the drawing board and eventually just decided to, do a soft reboot of Doom, but really try to make it more like the classic games. Obviously, the whole arsenal comes back. There's a few new additions that kind of play like similar roles, but they bring back old demons like Kakos, Pinkies, Mancubuses, the like. They bring back the very run and gun style of shooting. And really, if there's anything 2016 does new on its own, it really tries to like not only do what people really wanted to see from Doom for the longest time, is just same gameplay but like better looking, obviously, less sprite based, but what it tries to do is both build its new world, which, you know, definitely keeps some of the more survival horror, darker kind of stylings that Doom 3 was going for, but like more of the, like, iconography of the older Dooms. But more importantly, it tries to reinvent, or more importantly, establish the Slayer, later revealed to actually be the original Doom guy, as a character, and really just try to get you into the very fun atmosphere of getting to walk in this guy's shoes and be just like this monstrous murder machine wreaking havoc on all these demons. In 2016, I mean, I can't give it enough praise, because obviously, like, when it comes to, like, reboot revival games, I don't think you could do any better. It does exactly what it sets out to do. It reestablishes what people really enjoyed about those older games, but brings it into a modern era. And most importantly, going forward, it sets a new foundation for everything that would come after it, right? So obviously 2016 is a smash hit, everybody loves it, right? But if you play 2016, you'll probably note that, like, while the game's really good and really fun, and most importantly, it's very much just a very cathartic experience. It's just there to, like, make sure you're having a good time blasting the demons away. But that's when they kind of, like, fumble on some of the stuff, because once you get to the latter half of the game, when you have all the upgrades, all the really powerful weapons, they stop introducing enemies and stuff. It kind of just, I don't want to say the difficulty falls off really hard, but it becomes trivialized, right? Because it's like, okay, you have the super shotgun, which can deal with most enemies very, very easily. You have the Gauss cannon with the infinite ammo and the mobile siege mode that just destroys everything. You really are just like, anything like left in your path is just up for having like a crater-sized hole put through it. They saw that and they said, okay, people like what we did with 2016, but it's also not really like it's very easy to just kind of breeze through the game in the latter half, and more importantly, like, kind of just tune out. And, you know, as fun as it is to just, you know, get into a flow state with Doom, there wasn't really much going on under the hood when it came to 2016. It's as classic shooter as classic shooters get. And what they wanted to do with Eternal is set out to evolve that, right? Eternal essentially takes everything from 2016 and amplifies it to not only a greater level, but more importantly, trying to get its players to really go into the cooler things you could do in that game. So when it came to Eternal, they looked at everything they had with 2016 and they said, okay, let's make things a lot more intentional, and most importantly, let's really try to push our players into engaging with these systems we have and this combat loop that we have, right? So now you're encouraged to weapon swap more, you're encouraged to use multiple different weapon mods. The game has this amazing fall terrain and weak point system that really what it ends up doing is it makes how you approach enemies feel a lot like a fighting game, or like, even, like, I don't even know, just something a lot more intentional in a first-person shooter game, to where, you know, you start practicing combos, you start learning what enemies are weak to what weapons, what's a good way of like dealing with a very problem enemy extremely fast while maintaining resources, because that's a big thing the game does too, is like they drop the ammo down a lot, and now it's all about, okay, use chainsaw to replenish ammo, use meat hook and your traversal options to get around. Definitely make use of every single weapon, because honestly, Doom Eternal does not have any bad weapons, I don't think. I think all of them are extremely solid, and they always have a purpose, and that's what makes it really fun to have an arsenal that big against hordes of enemies that are all super specialized in what they do. And most importantly with that game, the verticality gets cranked up, like, all the way. Like, 2016 definitely took a lot of inspiration from, you know, obviously later games and just later action games. Like, if you're going to be moving a lot, you don't just want to only have it be grounded movement. You want to jump. You want to start, like jumping over barriers, getting to higher ground and stuff like that. And 2016 had that, but it definitely is nowhere near to the degree that Eternal has. I mean, Eternal has all this fucking crazy stuff you could do, the meat hook momentum stuff you can do, double jumping, just how dashing and glory kills can launch you towards an enemy in a second and allow you to just reposition very, very quickly on the fly. It's an incredibly impressive, just absolute balls to the walls, exciting game to play. It's I mean, I don't think I have to give it any more praise than most people have. It's one of the best single-player shooter campaigns of all time, and honestly, one of the best designed combat loops in any game I've played. It's absolutely insane. One thing Eternal really does too is it goes really hard on the fan service. Most of the demons are back to their original Doom 2 designs, which personally for me, I just think they look a lot better. I always think it's impressive to see how much it is committed to taking these older sprites and updating them to the modern age, and how great these enemy designs look and how readable they are, which just really helps make this such a complete and satisfying experience. But on top of that too, they also are not afraid to just get really arcadey with it, because I mean, like, again, as Eternal ramps up all these things, like there's platforming sections, there's very arcadey, bright, like, neon colors in the HUD, and for the pickups that let you know, like, right on reaction, like, what is what. There's sections with spinning fireball lines like Bowser's Castle. Like, it's crazy. It's an insane game, and I think that kind of turned a lot of people off of Eternal, because, like, 2016 especially, it does try to maintain a more kind of like atmospheric survival horror kind of thing, whereas Eternal, while it's less horror, it still maintains that very, like, metal, like, badass, you know, very, very, like, grimdark sort of style to it, as it tries to paint the Slayer to be this kind of larger than life, legendary, like, killing machine. And I think it does all that stuff really well. I do see how a lot of people can think it gets a little goofy at times, though, definitely. So Eternal comes in, does what it sets out to do, and, you know, if you played it, you probably like it. But there's also a lot of people that, again, they don't want this kind of experience from Doom. They don't want something so intentional, so, like, based around strategy, so APM heavy, so input heavy, right? The one thing about Eternal you have to understand is that, like, Eternal gives you 8 or 9 different weapons, a chainsaw to replenish ammo, a flamethrower that gives you armor, 2 different types of grenades that you also need a button to switch on, and then all of the movement options. And really, altogether, like, that's for keyboard and mouse, like, that's, you know, the way I had my game set up is, you know, WASD to move. I had Q for flame belch. I probably had like E for the equipment launcher, and then like middle mouse button to switch grenades. But even still, that's like, you have to account for melee. You eventually get the Crucible and the Sentinel Hammer in the DLC that we'll talk about very soon. But it's a lot. You know, once the game slowly deals it all out to you and you grow accustomed to it, it's well set up and well implemented that it doesn't, you know, it's not super alienating, I don't think. But it is, it can feel a little bit overwhelming at times. I could definitely say that much. And after an experience like the Eternal campaign, I think a lot of people were wondering and questioning, like, okay, what is an Eternal sequel or a follow-up game to Eternal going to look like? Because it's just it goes so ham on every single thing possible. How can you escalate the experience further for players to keep them hooked and want them coming back for more? And eventually we got DLC for Doom Eternal, known as The Ancient Gods Part 1 and Part 2. Came out a little bit shortly out after Eternal's launch. It was also not only, you know, during COVID and a lot of other stuff, but it was also in a very, like, strange period for id, where there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. This is when Doom Eternal composer Mick Gordon, who really helps define the sound and the feel through his scoring, steps away due to some Eternal problems that he was having, and really just, I gotta say too, just very poor mistreatment of not only him but his work. that I think a lot of people, but both Mick and a lot of Doom fans felt really burned by. But the Ancient Gods, or as everyone just usually refers it to as Tag, and I'll be referring to it as such, Tag comes out, and obviously, like, listen, first of all, it's the goal with Tag, and something that I'm very certain that they were designing for, was to have Tag be an experience for Doom Eternal diehards, right? Like, the players that really love Eternal, and they were just not only looking for more content, but most importantly for Doom Eternal fans, looking for more of a challenge, looking to see how things can be ramped up and made more interesting. They dropped Tag, and the thing with Tag that I feel like I and a lot of other people have a problem with is Tag's way of trying to ramp difficulty kind of goes against a lot of what was already set up in Doom Eternal. And really what I mean by that is, you know, Doom Eternal's combat system is built so much around the array of weapons you have, this incredibly well implemented faltering system, the weak point system, just a lot of stuff like that. And the way they ramp difficulty in Tag is they start introducing more elements that kind of box you into a certain way of playing. You know, the big thing Tag does the first time is introduce the spirit enemy type, which is an enemy based on the summoner from 2016, who is able to possess any unit and takes away their ability to have weak points broken. Really inflates their health bar a lot, definitely. Gives them resistances to energy and rockets, specifically because, you know, lock-on rockets, ballista, these were very strong and powerful weapons that Doom Eternal players really relied on a lot during combat sections. And really what they're saying is, okay, in order to fight this enemy, compared to, like, how things normally were set up in Doom Eternal, where, like, an enemy can be designed to, like, force you away from using certain options, but what they don't do is put up a stop sign and say, hey, you cannot use this against me. Like Carcass, you can still kill a Carcass with rockets. You can still, like, kill Whiplash with any weapon in the game, even though its like movement is designed to, like, snake away from, like, some of the more, like, aim-based weapons, you know? Marauder, even. I mean, Marauder, like, yeah, you kind of do have to just, like, when you start learning Marauder, you kind of do just have to hit him when he's approaching and attacking. But, you know, Doom Eternal players, they know these systems well enough. They found ways to stagger him before he even gets to that state and do these amazing kills on him. That's what's cool about this combat system and everything they set up in Eternal, is that it's really fun to explore, and I don't feel that way with Tag, and with a lot of it does, because again, with stuff like Spirits, really, if you do try using the weaker stuff on that enemies, you just end up wasting resources on them, and really, like, you kind of are just forced to, like, hey, this is the option, this is how you deal with these guys. But more importantly, like, the one thing I really hated about Spirits is Spirits are the only enemy in the game that only dies to one thing specific. Like, or one of the, like, really one of the only enemies in the game that does that, but in such a very, like, annoying way, right? Because in order to get rid of Spirits, other than just clear out a room so they have nothing else to possess, is you have to expel them from the demon, and then hit them with Microwave Beam mod on the Plasma Rifle, which was a very underutilized mod at the time. And also it's a Ghostbusters reference, so I get why they're doing that. But, you know, in order to take out a Spirit, you have to focus your attention on them with a Microwave Beam mod, deal with any other enemies coming at you, but you can't fire on them because you have to be cooking the Spirit the whole time. And, like, really what it does is it just breaks you out of the flow state and the combat loop. And I just really didn't like that. Like, Tag does a lot of that stuff. They have these turrets that, you know, they're like the Met enemies from Mega Man, where you have to get close enough to have them pop out. Like, you just have to wait for them. You have to wait for them to show up and then give them 2 shots, not even 1 shot, 2 shots, and then they're gone. And that's just really, like, I'm fine with enemies having weak point. Like, I like Marauder even, and I like what they did with Marauder and Tag. I like the room of 2 of them, throwing them all in all these different scenarios. But really, my problem with Tag is that its idea of evolving Doom Eternal and ramping up difficulty is just to say, okay, here, all these things you learned, okay, now they don't work anymore. So, so Tag 1 comes out, it's extremely controversial to the point where they have to go back and nerf not only the spirits, but some of the enemy placements and, like, room layouts of the couple levels that were in that original DLC. And I don't really like them doing that either, because, like, there was nothing wrong with the room placements, there was nothing wrong with how much Tag was throwing at you. The problems were, again, your idea of ramping difficulty is saying, okay, you can't do this anymore, figure out a new way to deal with it. Which is something Eternal doesn't really do. Like, Eternal doesn't really say, hey, there's only one way to beat this. Eternal says, here's this guy, here's how he works. If you know how to play around in our systems, you can figure out any way you want to kill this guy at any point. So I think a lot of Tag 2 kind of, like, is a lot more lax. They cut back on enemy designs like that. Instead, we just get more, like, variants of older enemies, like the Armored Barons, the Stone Imps that are weak to the full auto shotgun. They give you the Sentinel Hammer, which is a really fun replacement for the Crucible, and definitely, like, it is so overtuned once it gets upgraded that it kind of just, like, makes, like, really just trivializes a lot of rooms, because you could just stun an entire room of enemies and then deal with them out as you see fit. But it was still fine. However, the entirety of this DLC builds up to a boss fight with the new big bad that they were setting up after all the stuff with Conmaker and Hayden and all the stuff, which is Doom's version of Satan, the Dark Lord, who is gassed up as being a dark reflection of the Doomslayer, right? So what do you think a boss fight and a true test of your skills and your abilities in this game is going to look like? I'll tell you, it's 5 phases of a flat circle that has to have enemies, like little, like, fodder zombies circling around it, so you're able to resource manage it. And the Dark Lord himself is a big marauder with more moves, but still only one time where you can hit him effectively. And he heals. He heals when he swings on you, and most importantly, he heals when you fuck up on him. If you hit him out of turn, he heals to full. Try doing that for 5 phases with only 1 checkpoint. And listen, people can do it. I'm not saying the Dark Lord is impossible, but when I played against Dark Lord the first time and I got to the last phase, and he healed to full off one mistake after 30 minutes of just circling around waiting him to finally leave an opening, I just decided at that point, this isn't fun. And again, we could talk about how COVID influenced stuff, how this probably wasn't exactly how they would hope things panned out. But really, at the end of the day, if you want a final boss fight to, like, especially a boss fight that is a true test of a Doom Eternal player's skills, is the best test of that really just a 5-phase fight in an arena with no verticality, no different kinds of like corridors and layouts and ways to get around, and a guy who essentially just has a melee attack, a shield bash attack, a gun, summons a bunch of other like hologram demons to waste your time, and most importantly, just doesn't really feel like what he was set out to be, which is, most importantly, a reflection of the Slayer himself. You know, he doesn't use any other weapons. He just uses a big sword. He just fucking, you know, does marauder things, and it's just really lame. He won't kill you ever. If you're actually like, if you've gotten that far in the game, you're good enough at Doom Eternal to like, no, you're not gonna die to this guy, but you'll never kill him because he barely gives any openings, and he also just keeps healing for 5 phases. And at that point, I just decided, I'm like, dude, if all Doom Eternal can do from this point on going forward is just, like, very arbitrarily cranking up the difficulty by taking things away and making more scenarios where you just have to beat bosses and beat enemies in certain ways, rely on just one bread and butter combo the entire time, I really just decided that, like, this isn't fun. Like, I just didn't want to finish at that point. And it really, I gotta say, like, me and a lot of other people, it soured a lot of the experience of Eternal afterwards. And most importantly, it was the cap-off to Eternal. So, looking back on that experience, I was very afraid for what a new Doom game going forward would look like. So, yeah, I mean, it was just a very weird and scary time. And I want to say, too, that, like, as much as I'm ripping on the Dark Lord tag, a lot of the design philosophy of it, it does not mean I enjoy Eternal any less. It does not mean that I was not confident that it would come back and deliver a satisfying gameplay experience. But it definitely got me worried about what the future was going to look like for not only Doom, but, like, really more importantly, like, whether or not there would be a huge split and a divide between people that just like Doom and people that really like Doom Eternal systems and just want to constantly, like, feel like their skill is ramping up to a degree. Like, I think it's fine to design games for difficulty, right? I mean, FromSoft has been doing that for the past decade, and they practically run this industry now, as everybody tries to play catch-up with them. You know, the times when people do criticize FromSoft for the way they're doing things, especially as you know, a bunch of video essayists akin to myself get on here and say that, like, FromSoft doesn't know how to design enemies anymore. It's more so, like, akin to that point when people start having that problems when the difficulty... When difficulty instead goes from giving you a tool set and saying, hey, we're going to challenge you to see if you can manage all of this. The bigger problems are where someone comes in and says, hey, you got this nice little tool set here. Well, can you get through an encounter with only this? Can you get through an encounter with all... I don't mind that for, like, side stuff, but most importantly with a game like this, you want freedom of choice, and you want freedom of approach, and you want especially freedom in just how you go about a combat encounter, right? If you're gonna give me limited ammo, then I don't want you to say to me at a certain point, well, you know, you should have not wasted the ammo here on this guy, because now this weapon just doesn't work against this guy. Really, if I could give an example of what it's similar to, it's I had some friends run through Elden Ring the first time, doing holy builds, and when you get to the endgame bosses of Elden Ring, a lot of them just have not just flat out holy resistance. Some of them just are invulnerable to it. So if you spent the entire game building up this kind of build style and this kind of play style, you get to here and you're just invalidated right at the end. It just kind of sucks. But now we're here, 2025. We finally have the next new Doom game on the horizon, and it definitely seems like it's not what a lot of people expected, but, you know, if you were already along for the ride of what both 2016 and Eternal was trying to set out to do, both, like, narrative-wise, gameplay-wise, all that stuff, and you've just played similar games, I don't think this is really a surprising direction to go. So let's talk about it. So, Doom: The Dark Ages. Why the Dark Ages, right? Now, this was something they were setting up within lore and the new story that they were going with for a long time. They've been setting up in this new kind of Doom world that they're building. The original Doom guy from the original Doom games eventually gets found by an ancient civilization of people that I guess like fight against hell and maybe have some ulterior motives about the things that they're doing. Gets founded by them. He is so good at killing demons that they give him godly powers, and they just make the Doomslayer, now known as the Doomslayer, they make him this godly force that they use as they see fit to just... he's a worker for them, basically. Like, they point him in a direction, and he kills stuff for them. That's essentially where they're going with. And if you played the end of Tag, you'll know that, like, they essentially just icebox the Slayer so that whenever they want to do a game set in the future with him, you know, all they have to do is just open the coffin again and just see what happens there, right? But I'm glad instead they went with the prequel, right? Because, like, really, after Eternal, you know, sets up Hell on Earth, the Dark Lord, all this other shit, it's like, really, where else can you go from there? And really, the answer is instead to just go back story-wise, and show a more interesting time period for this character that was already pre-established. And while there's story reasons for doing this, I think a lot of it is focused purely on what this means for the gameplay. Let's start with the most obvious thing. It is medieval fantasy Doom, which may sound like a shock to some people, but, I mean, again, this is something they've set up for this new game series in particular, but more importantly, if you've gone back and played, you know, retro-style FPSs of the 90s, and the games, like indie games that tried to harken back to those eras, a medieval fantasy FPS it's nothing new, right? Quake kind of did it in its like, environment style, but then there's also games like Hexen, Heretic, you know, eventually you get games like a Medieval, Hedon, bunch of other stuff, right? That are these games that kind of say, okay, just because you're doing a first-person shooter doesn't mean you can't add more flavor to the stylings of it and the themes of it. You know, you can instead say, okay, let's make a medieval game, and now all the weapons are either, you know, maybe they're melee weapons, maybe the combat is melee focused. You know, you get like bows, you get like very crazy looking like medieval like catapults and stuff that you get to use. It's a lot of like fun, neat ideas for what you could do for a game like this, and also the stylings of the game like this, and that's why it's really, really exciting for me, especially because, I mean, like, when it comes to retro FPSs, I'm a huge fan of when they do this kind of idea. I think it's a really fun... It can feel a little gimmicky at times, but, like, it ends up a lot of the time feeling incredibly satisfying. And like I've said before, this styling leads itself more towards gameplay than it does anything else. But most importantly, this styling kind of leads them back to not only getting back to a more familiar and classic style of shooting in general, but a lot more similar to the original Doom games that they've even gone on to say that, like, definitely inspired the direction they're going with in the Dark Ages, right? And you would definitely see it straight away. Now, if you're a fan of Eternal, I still feel like this game is maintaining a lot of the core things that made the Eternal combat loop good. It seems like, at the moment, while we haven't had it, like, flat out confirmed, we do know the faltering system is back. We can kind of see glimpses of the weak point system here and there. I don't know if it's entirely back for sure. Maybe it'll just be something similar to it, but... You know, the way you interact with enemies and how they interact with both your toolkit and also just, you know, their kind of what they have going on, it's still there. It's still the core design philosophy of Eternal. It's just being taken in a very different direction. And most importantly, what I think Dark Ages is setting out to do is it's trying to, like, have its cake and eat it too, essentially. It wants to still be Eternal, but more importantly, it wants to really harken back to the original Doom games, and most specifically, how it felt to kind of take on those hordes those enemy placements, and really the kind of combat style between you and the enemies that goes on in those older games. And if there's something to talk about with the Dark Ages combat loop and what it's setting out to do, I think you really have to point to like what is going to be the star of the show for the Dark Ages, right? Because for Eternal, it was 100% the meat hook. You know, it influenced how you traverse the arenas, why the arena design became so vertical, why they started to like spread out enemies on all these like different levels and stuff. And for Dark Ages, it is 100% based around the shield saw. So obviously, you know, medieval kind of fantasy styling of Doom, they're gonna give you a shield and implement it very naturally into this new game. You know, it has a ton of depth and things it can do. You could throw it. You could throw it into heavier enemies and it like kind of like spins around and stun locks them for a little bit, which is kind of cool. You know, you also have the very defensive capabilities of it with blocking, parrying, deflecting. But the craziest part about both this and another kind of like subsequent weapon type that they've added is the shield. While it has a bunch of different functionalities, according to them, it's all on one input. It does everything on one input, and I guess it reacts contextually to like what's going on in the game. I don't know exactly how this works, because I'm really curious about like the scenarios where, say, if you want to decide between throwing and blocking, like how it chooses that. Like I understand more of like, you know, if you block something that's parryable or deflectable, it will react accordingly and send that back. But I've yet to at least glean from the gameplay like how this actually works, but it is incredibly interesting. And akin to something like the equipment launcher or the flame belch, it's definitely like designed to work in tandem with, you know, your arsenal. Some of the other things we'll get into way later, but most importantly, you're going to see what the shield saw, like, it is what the game is built around, right? Like, outside of just its combat capabilities, you do see from the gameplay both in combat scenarios and also for just, like, normal, like, navigating of the level. It appears to be how, you know, you traverse, how you deal with certain enemies, how you deal with certain like horde enemy placement designs. You know, the way they're kind of designing this game is it's like it almost is like a sort of sword and board style of combat, but with a gun instead. of you know, seeing how you use the shield in the offhand to open up opportunities for your main weapon to go in on people, which I really enjoy. I think the shield saw alone just gets me incredibly excited for this game, just in like in seeing all the ways it can be applied in a bunch of different combat scenarios. It's just a really cool addition. Another addition that makes a lot of sense for a game like this is its melee options, which there appear to be at least 3 confirmed so far. I don't know if there's going to be any more. I don't know if we're going to get like a super melee weapon or whatever. But most interestingly, these 3 weapons seem like they're kind of tied back to Doom Eternal's original kind of like resource management system. And they seem to like all be replacements for something or the other. So take, for example, the main kind of like workhorse melee weapon, as it appears to be, which is the flail. And every time you see it in this trailer, enemies are dropping ammo, they're dropping health pickups and like. It appears to be kind of like a reskin for the chainsaw in a way, where like, you know, chainsaw in these new Doom games goes from being like, you know, just a standard melee weapon to being like, okay, this is how you turn enemies into just like, you know, health pickups, ammo pickups, all this other stuff. And the flail seems to be like that too. You're gonna see as we go forward, it's also tied to another system that I'll get onto soon, but it seems like it's like that. And then we get into the other 2 melee options, which are an electrified punch, which I'm gonna assume, based on like its kind of like AoE capabilities, is akin to a blood punch. And then there's also this Doom spiked mace, as they describe it, and I guess this one to me looks more like just like a kind of like a standard insta-kill melee weapon, kind of akin to how the Crucible was in Eternal. I wish I knew more about this one in specific, but I am going to assume, like, just based off what I'm seeing from the gameplay and what I can glean so far, these are now medieval replacements for those three things, right? You know, it's flail, shock punch, mace instead of chainsaw, blood punch, crucible. My biggest question in my eyes is, like, because the other thing with it too is, like the shield, it is all on one input, and I'm just wondering how the game decides in these scenarios, like, which weapon it's going to use. But I find it very interesting. And to kind of tie back to the shield and wrap it together with the melees when we're talking about this, you're seeing how they want to keep the depth that Eternal had, but just, like, streamline it, and most importantly, I think, especially after the buyout, make this a game that feels a lot better on controller. And I'm obviously holding a PS4 controller here, and this is supposed to be an Xbox game. You know, like I said for Eternal, even on keyboard and mouse, there's a lot of inputs. There's a lot of things you have to keep track of. And I think just trying to, like, simplify it, or more importantly, like, get things all condensed to, like, one button press without taking away their utility and their capabilities, is definitely the idea of what Dark Ages is trying to set out to do, which I find very interesting. And that leads me perfectly into this new glory kill system that they have, which, you know, the glory kills starting 2016 got even better in Eternal. They're cinematic, they're short and sweet, which is always nice, but, like, part of what sells the sweet part of the short and sweet is that they're incredibly well animated. They have this perfect, like, rhythm to them in, like, these quick little combos you do on guys to kill them. And they just flow well with the combat loop, again. And they're also resource management. They give you health back. They keep you topped off. But, you know, they also make it so that, like, a stun enemy eventually just becomes not only a dead enemy, but, you know, a health pickup, a temporary invincibility to get you out of scenarios. As Eternal does, they end up being mobility to get you out of sticky situations. It's really fucking cool. I do think glory kills, however, have always been very contentious for, like, the really classic Doom fans. Because really all they want to do at the end of the day is just shoot guys. They don't care for this other stuff. They don't care for, like, the more, you know, things less based around just shooting enemies with fun guns. But I think that's why this new glory kill system is here to begin with, because it's supposed to be very in and out. You know, you get these little, like, circles and flashes on enemies, and you can very quickly just, like, go for a hit, take them out. Apparently there's, like, a combo system for the melees in this game. The weird part for me, or the part I'm really trying to, like, figure out, is it seems like the melee system and the glory kill system are so tied together anyway. I don't even know if I should be calling them separate things. They all just kind of seem like they're integral to each other. Because what these melees do is they, you know, you go for a swing, it kind of freeze frames for a second to sell the impact on stuff, and then if the enemy's not dead, you just keep swinging on them until eventually it becomes a glory kill. And that's the whole idea behind this new glory kill system, is that it's supposed to, like, be at your own leisure, take out enemies as you see fit. You have a freedom of how you approach it. You don't have to, like, maybe you don't have to wait for an enemy to get dazed anymore. Maybe you don't have to, like, maybe you just start with a melee and just see if you could just chunk a guy down. I think the new glory kill system is kind of, like, the only thing I'm a little worried about, because, again, while I like to having the freeze frames and you know, the slowdown to, like, sell the impact, I do feel like this kind of still isn't solving the problem that people have with glory kills, is that it does pace break. It takes you out of the fight. It kind of forces you eventually to say, like, hey, you kind of need glory kills in a way to get through some of these combat scenarios. But all in all, I do like this new change. I like how it's implemented. Again, I think just in general, just making it so it doesn't, like, completely, you know, it's less of, you know, press button cutscene and more so just, like, an actual melee hit is cool. But I'm still not certain on it, but as you see, like, there's something later that we can talk about that I feel like is going to make this way less of a problem, so. But before I do that, I have to get on to the most important part of a new Doom game, and especially one of this flavoring, which are the guns and the arsenal. Because really going in, originally, I was probably like most people, I was like, okay, like, they've ripped everything from the ground up. They're not going to have the classic, you know, very standard kind of gun stylings that we've seen before. But color me surprised because, like, not only, obviously the SSG comes back no matter what, and I guess we'll start there. I mean, the SSG in this game just looks awesome. Obviously there's no more meat hook, unfortunately. I really do, I think my favorite part about it is that, you know, especially for a game that's inspired by, like, medieval fantasy settings, and also just, not just, like, games like it, but, you know, obviously when I think of a lever action shotgun, which this one is, I think of stuff like, you know, Evil Dead, Army of Darkness, things like that. And, you know, I also think a big part of the reason this gun is lever action now, too, is because now you can reload it one-handed while you're holding the shield, which is awesome. But, yeah, it's still the SSG, it's still punchy, it's powerful, it looks great. It's exactly the kind of gun you want in a game like this. The more surprising part for me is, like, there is at least, like, a surprising amount of guns that I can kind of feel like you could say are either returning, or more so, like, they have just, like, a replacement, and they're pretty on the safe side, or more akin to stuff you just normally see in a Doom game, right? We could start with just the normal shotgun. There is just, like, a normal base combat shotgun in this game, not a double barrel. And it just looks, it looks very standard, it looks fine, but, like, I'm just surprised it's part of the arsenal, because I really thought that they would go just, like, every other weapon besides the SSG would be something, like, crazy and out there, but, like, no, there's just some normal standard weapons like that. There's that, there is the accelerator, which we've already seen, which is definitely more, you know, originally I thought this was going to be the plasma rifle replacement, because, you know, it's just like a very fast, rapid-fire shooting energy weapon. And then in this trailer that we recently got, we get revealed that there's just an actual plasma rifle gun. More importantly, it's very unique, and it's very reminiscent of other id properties. Most importantly, it is a double-barreled plasma gun that alternates the barrels firing, so it's like a Quake nail gun. The most interesting thing I could see about it, like, especially when you have to compare it to the accelerator and, like, you know, a more traditional kind of, like, rapid-fire type of weapon, is that it seems to be, like, shocking some of the enemies in the footage. You know, we've seen, obviously, the shock punch already, but, like, it appears to be, like, kind of, like, spreading and, like, chaining off enemies, which is kind of neat. I don't know if I mean, we don't have, like, a lot of confirmation on most of these weapon names, so I don't know if this is actually just a plasma rifle. I just know it looks like it, right? It definitely looks like it. You know, it has the same kind of, like, Doom 2 front barrel styling. But I'm just surprised to see it, but I'm not mad. I'm really not mad. It's cool to actually get, like, new takes on some of these weapons. I definitely do think, though, when it comes to Dark Ages, I'm definitely more excited for these kind of crazier out there weapons. I mean, like, in games like this, there is always a weapon I want to see, and luckily this game has it already, which is, like, an impaler gun, a gun that just shoots giant spikes that, like, nail people to walls, and God knows this game has that. It's probably, I would say, at least from what we've seen so far, it appears to be, like, the longest. I would have to assume it's, like, the longest range weapon we have in the current arsenal, because, like, God knows if you fire that thing off, it's firing hard and it's going extremely far. It definitely does seem like, though, a lot of the weapons are more akin to being better from close to mid-range, which we'll definitely get more into as we talk about how this game is trying to set itself up. But the more interesting part for me with this nail gun is, like, the one question I'm asking myself is, like, does it only just stick one enemy, or will this like pierce through a bunch of enemies and hit them all at once? Obviously, if there's a fan favorite gun that everyone loves of these Dark Ages weapons, it's definitely the Skull Crusher. It's the one with the most unique look to it, the most unique flavoring of it. It also kind of has like a very interesting role, as it seems like it is best for like crowd clear and DPS, right? Like it shoots a wave of grounded up skull fragments out like rapid fire style. It just like eats through. So you could take out like a lot of like hordes of like really widespread enemies. If you see the crosshair on this thing, it's wide. It goes wide, right? So you could either do that, or you could like chew up a Mancubus really fast. It's just a really cool looking gun. So I want to see more stuff like that. And really, so far, and in this trailer even, we haven't seen a lot of the arsenal actually. But going back and looking at the footage, we do get glimpses of some of the other weapons, right? There is this spiker weapon that appears at some point during the trailer. It's only one of these weapons that we see firing. All of these weapons, by the way, that I'm mentioning here, they don't have any like UI details that we can see in the game yet. So like I'm kind of just like, I don't know what the ammo count's like that can help me like inform like what kind of weapon it is. I kind of just have to look at it and assume what's going on with it. And most of them are pretty like readable like right away, right? Like there's this like belt-fed spiker weapon. Kind of looks like a little like mini revolver that seems to just like be like a rapid fire sort of like chain gun-esque kind of weapon. That it probably is like the chain gun replacement in a way. Unless you want to call the Skull Crusher that, I don't know. To each his own. There's that. There is a gun we haven't even seen in footage yet, which is a cannon. It appears to be like the rocket launcher stand-in, and I'm really curious about that one because like I not only want to know if it's just gonna be like a rocket launcher reskin, or if this thing is going to shoot like cannonballs akin to maybe something like the cannonball in Ultra Kill, where it like pierces through enemies and does like really heavy damage. And then there's this, you get a very small glimpse of it before it goes away, but there's like this weird looking kind of like occult looking energy weapon that's kind of like, it kind of looks like a rail gun. It's got like 3 little prongs on it and this little like orb in the middle. And I have to assume that's probably going to be like some sort of like energy weapon, maybe a more like accuracy based, like kind of like pick off an enemy really fast and then switch back to something else weapon. It could even be like I've said, like an electricity gun or something more similar to these, like something you'd see more in games like Hexen or games like a Medieval, but I really don't know. So obviously we've yet to see the BFG, which I'm gonna assume is in the game, and you're always gonna have a BFG in a Doom game like this. We don't know if the Unmaker is coming back at all or something similar to it, like another super weapon option. The only other weapon we've seen, and it's less of a weapon because again it's more akin to, just based off what it is. It's like a shoulder-mounted chain gun, it looks like. And as they say, they're kind of like dumbing things down and putting more things on like one input. I'm excited by that, but then it's also like, okay, if you still have things like equipment launcher and you still have things like, I think the dash is still in the game even, it's good to streamline, but like, do you really need a like mounted kind of weapon anymore? I don't know. We've yet to see like what it will do, and it definitely feels like it'll probably be like a later upgrade of the game if I'm going to assume anything. So I don't know, but like, the biggest question mark for me right now on like what's the game gonna look like is like, what is the full arsenal like? Like, is it still limited to the number of weapons we had in Eternal? Like obviously things are gonna get replaced here and there, but like, is it only that? Are we getting like a bunch of different weapons? Are we gonna have like are we gonna go up to like 10 different keys or whatever? And really, the one thing I want to see especially is like these more flavorful weapons that we have yet to see what's going on with them, what are they doing differently, that stuff that came before. Because the big thing with weapons, I think I can confidently pin down, right, is, well, I think weapons will have, you know, we've seen the sort of upgrade system the game has already. I don't think there's weapon mods. I think they're also going to get rid of weapon mods to kind of like streamline things and put less focus on, like, you know, having to worry about every single thing on like, you know, just less bloat overall. But I don't know, like, I'm curious, like, how these weapons are going to add depth and stand apart from each other. Because, I mean, so far we have a lot of, you know, so far, I mean, like, all we can really say is we have 2 shotguns, a bunch of, like, AoE rapid fire weapons, and then, you know, we do have at least confirmed that there's gonna be, like, some sort of, like, explosive, like, cannon-like weapon. And I'm just wondering what's going on with them.
Real quick, hey, it's future Tom here, you know, making up for past Tom's mistakes like usual. As it turns out, looking back on some footage, it appears there actually is weapon mods in the game. And I was getting these weapon mods confused with new weapons, because if you go back and look at the footage, like, the double-barrel plasma gun is actually just the accelerator. And same with the little belt-fed spiker thing, that's just the impaler, and they appear to just have weapon mods. I don't think they're going to be the same as Eternal, like, I don't think they're going to function on, like, an alt-fire system. I think instead they just changed the actual functionality of the weapon, which I think is cool. Again, still consolidating the inputs more, you know, instead of just, like, having a normal firing mode and then an alt-fire. It's instead just changing how the gun functions, which is cool. But that does mean that currently the only weapons we know about are combat shotgun, SSG, accelerator, the cannon, the impaler, and then that new Sentinel energy weapon. And then the rest are just actual, like, changes and upgrades to other weapons. So I'm really curious, like, what the rest of the arsenal is looking like, and more importantly, like, I'm wondering if there's multiple weapon mods or multiple weapon upgrades, right? Because obviously with the impaler, it goes from being a less, you know, power heavy, slow reloading weapon to, you know, a very fast shooting pressure weapon. And I'm wondering if there's, like, another alternate version of that weapon, and other alternate versions of all the other weapons. I'm very curious to see what's going on with the weapon system and the upgrade system in this game, especially now.
And this is what I'm excited to talk about, because while, you know, if you've watched the trailer, you definitely tell that, like, they're definitely bringing back a lot of the old classic enemies, like Mancubus is still there, Cacodemon's still there, Arachnotron's still there. We can even see the Imp has a crazy new redesign akin to its original appearance, which I've seen a lot of fun theories online from people saying that, like, oh, this Doomslayer was so good at killing demons that, like, the Imps had to evolve to become faster and like harder to catch up with and more evasive in order to not just, like, get flattened by this guy, which I think is cool. But yeah, I mean, obviously the demons have a lot more of this darker kind of, like, fantasy element to them. We can see at one point, I don't know if all of them are you know, getting, like, reskins or whatever, or, like, or even if some of these enemies are actually the enemies I think they are. But, you know, I think we see, like, Hell Knights that get, like, armor at certain points, and they, like, throw axes now and stuff. There's definitely some new enemy types that are very interesting, that kind of, like, four-legged guy who seems like he's gonna be, like, kind of akin to the Doom Hunter in a way. We have the actual Doom Hunter in his former glory before he, you know, becomes a floating tank. You know, he gets his sword, he blocks. He seems like he's gonna be kind of like this game's, like, Marauder, where you kind of have to, like, be, like, mano a mano with him. But really, the most interesting thing about the demons in this game is not only, like, how they attack, but how they come together as a unit. And this is where what really excites me about Dark Ages and what it's trying to set out to do. Because specifically in the enemy designs, you are seeing how they're trying to harken back to the original game games. A lot of enemies now just throw out waves upon waves of projectiles, obviously to get you to, like, block and use the shield and stuff. But they want you, most importantly, to kind of, like, get back into this kind of, like, strafing shooting style that, like, the original Doom games had. You know, with less verticality, you can't just, like, you can't just use your mobility to avoid things. You have to kind of, like, bob and weave your way through in this, like, bullet hell kind of, like, style that I really, really, really like. I think this is the change that gets me the most excited for the game, because that's fun, right? That's something classic Doom fans like a lot. It's something that, like, as you make it more interesting with things like the shield, a lot of new players are going to be able to get into. And most importantly, it leads itself well to how they are going to structure both like the arena design and like the enemy placement, especially because you see in this trailer there is just moments where you get like these overhead shots of like armies upon armies of fodder demons, big heavy guys, just all standing in line, waiting to just really march at you, like at a very slow but steady pace, waiting for you to like kind of take them down fast. And that's what I think, you know, their tagline for this game is stand and fight, you know, so it definitely means things are going to be a little bit slower. It's not taking away the mobility though. Again, I mentioned before how the shield kind of leads itself into giving you these abilities to like gap close and stuff like that, but most importantly, like, they are just throwing hordes of enemies at you. They are throwing hordes of enemies at you that are going to slowly march towards your way and look to fuck you up. And I just really, really like that. I think that's fun. I mean, Doom, again, is so much more about, like, fighting, like, a one versus many kind of thing. You are one guy against a sea of enemies that you just need to, like, take out really fast. And the coolest part about what this game is trying to do is push you and harken back to those older days of, okay, you know, you see these guys, close the distance, get in close, blast them away, and pick them off one by one by one. And I really, really, really like that. I think it is probably, it's the coolest change they could do at this point, right? Because again, if you want to play Eternal's always there. And if they were going to make a sequel to Eternal, they would just have to keep ramping things up, right? Like, okay, now maps get more vertical. Now, you know, they couldn't add anything else to that combat loop besides just, like, again, box you into a style that really makes it, you know, it's more so testing your knowledge rather than testing, like, you're testing your knowledge in certain, like, situations rather than testing your entire catalog of knowledge of how this game works. And I think that's the most important part about this game, is it's trying to bring back that freedom of approach. You're able to just pick whatever weapons you want, go anywhere you want, fight any enemies you want, and most importantly, like, you choose the tools of destruction, which is nice. So I think it's just neat. And the environments definitely lead itself towards that way right now, right? Like, they haven't gotten rid of the verticality. You still see, like, you know, there's big castle walls. There's, you know, we see the Slayer use the shield to, like, throw him over some gaps during the little gameplay footage they showed off. But most importantly, the play space is a lot wider, right? Less corridors, less, you know, like steps and platforms and layers. There's no more monkey bars. There's no more fucking, like, meat hook, obviously. Everything is at eye level with you. But it's a wide area. And most importantly, they're going to cover any place that doesn't have enemies in enemies. I feel like you're going to get a lot less linear level design. It's going to be a lot more of, like, you know, they've described it as being open world like. They're not actual open worlds. They're more so kind of akin to, like, a Monster Hunter, like, open environment, right? You get a big play space, you have certain objectives you need to complete, but you can freely explore this as you see fit. They've already talked about how the upgrade system is coming back, and the way you'll find most of these upgrades is through just exploring, like, the dungeons and stuff. And again, you know, it's not all just, you know, flat land, as much as I was complaining about that with Dark Lord. It's not all flat land and stuff. You see kind of, like, tighter corridors and like these dungeon mines that they have. You know, there's little like barricades and like little like vantage points for enemies to have, but it's definitely it's flattened a lot. It's flattened in a way that is more akin to a Doom 2, where like, okay, if I want to get up there, I'm just running up these stairs and I'm putting this fucking shotgun barrel in this guy's face, you know. So, but it's impressive. It's very impressive. There's one thing I really love about the game. It is its visual style. Like, it's kind of like a half and half of going back to the kind of darker look that 2016 was setting up. Obviously, a lot more fantasy setting, right? You know, it's not sacrificing the clarity, but, you know, it's definitely not as bright and as colorful as something like Eternal was with its very arcadey kind of visual style. Some of it's still there and here and there, because, again, you see during the gameplay that, like, pickups are still, like, very, like, they're not very brightly colored. You know, they have neon colors to them, but they're kind of more transparent now to, like, kind of blend in more to the darker, more, like, less poppy visual style that the game has. But yeah, I mean, like, just looking at it, it's grimdark, it's fantasy, it still maintains some of, like, the tech-based kind of design that we've been seeing in Eternal. Like, a lot of the stuff you've seen in Eternal and 2016 is not going away. Like, this is still a Doom universe game. It's gonna have, you know, the Night Sentinel-esque, like, castle and fortress designs. It's gonna have very heavy metal inspired hellish environments. It's gonna have these kind of, like, tech bases and like abandoned labs that are all really cool. The only thing I don't like about the game so far, honestly, is, while I think the UI is great, I think the UI is awesome, actually, my only complaint with it is they're bringing back the kind of face in the middle that reacts to people, or like reacts to, like, what's going on in the game. But, like, I don't like the hologram kind of style with it. I think I at least wish they would add more detail to it so it looks more like the Slayer himself, like his actual face, and I think it would look a lot better. You could still keep that, like, kind of like hologram style, but, like, you shouldn't be bald, you know? My favorite thing about this UI, though, is I love how it incorporates the meat hook iconography into, like, the bar design, right? Like, the health and armor bar are these two little converging kind of, like, points, and they look very akin to the meat hook, which is nice. And I would definitely say, too, the UI is a lot less intrusive as it was in Eternal. Again, a lot less bright neon colors, more so these kind of transparent glows that just look really nice and just get the job done. So there's just some, like, minor little tidbits to end off on. I'm not going to talk too much about the Atlans and the Dragon sections, because we still haven't seen a lot of them yet. We just get like an idea of how they play, and I definitely feel like they're kind of the pace breakers for this game, whereas, like, you know, Eternal had things like tentacles and turrets and really, really egregious platform sections at a certain point that to, like, break up gameplay and make it feel different. And I definitely feel like those were more, they weren't badly designed, but, like, they definitely feel kind of like being forced to do something you didn't want to do. Whereas, like, the Atlan has been built up for so many games now. You want to see the giant Doom mech. And it plays basically just like a scaled-up Slayer, which is cool. And then there's the Dragon sections, which are, you know, these very adrenaline rush, high-fly shooting scenes that seem like they'll probably, if I had to assume anything, I imagine they'll kind of be, like, used as, like, travel between levels, maybe. Kind of like a gummy ship from, like, Kingdom Hearts, in a way. But yeah, I mean, those are cool. I'm glad to have those in the game. They've already confirmed there's no multiplayer, which, after both 2016 and Eternal, I'm not really surprised by. Like, it's those modes were cool, and they have their fans. But I always think that like, if you're buying a Doom game, you're more looking forward to a single player shooter campaign, and that's really what they're like they have their attention focused on at the moment. We get confirmation that this game is definitely going to be very story heavy. There's going to be a lot of story actually told within the cutscenes, and probably like in little like VO sections during gameplay, compared to like the codex where you go out of your way to pick them up and you read them if you want. I definitely feel like this is a lot more better. Like, it's... If you're gonna tell me a story, I'd rather, like... Not that it's not cool to have, like, environmental details and little, like, tidbits here and there, but, you know, if you're gonna show me a cutscene, like, let's have it be about the story and, like, what's going on in the game. I think the coolest addition, besides all the gameplay stuff in the game, is they have this very unique difficulty slider. You know, it still has the presets, like, we see Hurt Me Plenty, they'll probably have, like, UV and stuff. But it's very adaptive, and, like, you could take a look that it has... You know, people are calling this the fucking... Of course they are, because everyone is just brain rotted at this point. They call this the woke sliders or whatever. But, like, really, I mean, I'm more excited about this because if you don't enjoy the pace of the game or the speed of the game, you can just ramp any of these up to any degree that you want. And you essentially get to choose how you want the game to play. And I think that's really cool. Like, if you're not a fan of how the glory kills kind of slow down the game and break pace and whatever, if you just speed up the game, maybe it'll help alleviate that kind of problem you have. And I do think, too, that, again, big problem with Eternal as time went on is that it went more towards its heavy, like, its heavy hardcore player base. And eventually, at a certain point, I feel like no matter how you do difficulty and whatever, and how you do difficulty fluctuations, a lot of people could get left behind, and I don't think it's fair to say to someone, hey, you spend $70 on a game. If you just want to have a fun experience, like, just saying to someone get good is like, listen, like, the point of a video game is to learn it and understand it and play it. But, you know, if that doesn't mean you should be flat out denied an experience just because you don't, you know, you're the most heavy APM crazy fucking speedrunner possible, you know? There's some other stuff here and there. Obviously, the music is not being done by Mick Gordon anymore. It's also not being done by Andrew Holschild, who replaced him in Tag. It's being done by, I believe it's Finishing Move? And it sounds fine. It just doesn't really stick out to me at the moment, and the reason because is, like, the one thing Mick did amazingly with Eternal and 2016 soundtracks is, like, Mick understands how important a melody is to a song, and like, you know, how an earworm works, you know? It's something he's done very well. He uses a lot of leitmotifs. He brings back a lot of, like, other musical pieces from Doom's history to insert into his tracks that make them exciting and reminiscent, and most importantly, like, you want to listen to them. You know, they're not just there in the background while you're doing stuff. You don't want music like that. You want music to be scoring the game in your experience. So I do think Finishing Move is doing a good job. I just need to see, like, listen to some more tracks that, like, really stand out to me. And then last but not least, you know, we've gotten specs revealed. It definitely seems like it's pretty graphically intensive. I mean, I'm running like a 3070, so hopefully I'll be able to run this game. I'm at least past, like, minimum specs. But, you know, I can say that, like, Eternal, upon release, if you are having problems, you know, it was definitely not a fun experience. So I hope if they set the standard of, like, what you need to run this game, I hope you're able to have those things and then run it, because God knows a lot of games launch now in just very unoptimized states that can, like, really feel bad if you're trying to enjoy a really good game and you just can't play it. I think there's confirmation of Denuvo coming back to the game. There's, you know, it seems like they're bringing back some of the live service kind of, like, skin things and some of these, like, bonuses, but that they're bringing into the game. I don't know if they'll bring back the sort of, like, weekly event system that Eternal had for players, where, like, you know, they can do missions and unlock cosmetics and stuff. Probably, maybe not, I don't know. I don't know if you have to be logged into Bethesda Net still or whatever. I'm gonna assume so. I'm not against those things. I think skins are cool. I just wish there wasn't so much, especially as the game is now a single player only game. I know sometimes people just cheat to, like, run through a game real fast. I don't think there needs to be this much, like, red tape around the game, especially when it can be causing, like, problems not only to the game itself but, like, people's PCs. So we'll see. I don't know. Really, if there's a point to end on here, I really want to talk about what I imagine the flow state is going to be like for this game, because, like, as I've said, the shield is the star of the show. It enables so much in how you approach combat, how you approach these new enemies, and they're very bullet-heavy formations, the waves of them. You know, there'll probably be enemies that are very based around, like, you know, blocking and parrying and stuff like that. Really, if there's anything to say about the flow state of this game, I just like how streamlined it seems like they're making it. Way less input heavy, more so just, like, you know, consolidate everything to a button that makes sense. You know, you're shooting, it's trigger. I'm gonna assume that, like, melee is either on right click or maybe its own dedicated button. Maybe the shield saw is the exact same way. But, you know, everything is a lot more... It's more consolidated. It's more... It's a lot more intuitive and easy to pick up and play, it seems like, without sacrificing the really cool depth that Eternal had with the faltering system, with weak points, with how different weapons interact with enemies and environments. You know, there'll probably be some environmental hazards, even, like, you know, barrels that explode, or, like, saw traps and whatever. And while things have been flattened down and there's less verticality, I don't think that it means that the game is going to be too slower paced, especially with, like, the difficulty sliders. I don't think it's going to be super duper ammo management reliant. Like, I mean, you definitely see in the trailer that, like, weapons like the SSG and, like, the base shotgun, they definitely do have, like, sparser ammo counts than, you know, akin to Eternal than something like 2016. But I don't feel like the game is definitely as, you know, smacking you with the ruler like Eternal did. I think it's going to be a lot more freeform in how you approach it, again, with things like the glory kill system, the freedom in how, like, weapon choice, all that kind of stuff. And that's really what excites me about this game, especially, is this seems like Hugo and Marty and the team looked at what they did with Eternal, saw that everyone really liked it, but also saw that, like, it was potentially alienating to a large portion of their player base. And while it's nice to say, like, hey, yeah, believe me, when you learn this stuff, you're gonna feel amazing. I think it's sometimes better for a game to say, okay, well, we want you to learn, but let's make learning easier for you, right? You know, less buttons, less things to worry about, but still enough depth in its systems, and most importantly, like, enough creativity and experimentation going on that you get excited to figure out what's really under the hood. Hey, here's a really big enemy. Is there, like, a quick swap combo that can take him out really fast? Is it good to stun enemies with shield? One of my favorite interactions in this trailer is when you throw the shield at other enemies with shield, it explodes and they all just, like, topple over, which is really, really fun. I really like those kind of interactions and that kind of those kind of stylings that we've been seeing in Eternal. So I think it's really great. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think that's really all I have to say about the Dark Ages so far. I mean, we've only, like, for one reveal trailer and this little developer direct they did with Xbox, we've gotten a lot of information, but there's still a lot of stuff that, no pun intended, we're being left in the dark about, that I'm very curious to see upon either release or the next time we get footage, maybe at, like, QuakeCon or something, what's really going on with this game. I think it's incredibly interesting. I'm incredibly excited. Most importantly, I'm excited by the fact that, like, they looked at Eternal and they said, okay, here's how we make this, we do an experience similar to it, that feels fresh and feels new, but keeps a lot of what players liked about Eternal, and removing a lot of the pain points. And that just seems to sum up what they've been doing every single time with these new Doom games, is, like, they all stand on their own even after a new one comes out, and they all feel unique and exciting, and the gameplay in particular is just so engaging and really methodically thought out, that it's just a lot of masters at work in a time when AAA can, like, not only be very disappointing, but, like, what other games are even getting like this from AAA? Like, really, if you're looking for, like, shooters like this, you're really only getting it in the indie scene, and they're great. They're all great. So I encourage you, if you're excited for Dark Ages, you know, I don't know, hopefully I'll get out this video in time for the sale. they're selling both 2016 and Eternal at an incredibly cheap price right now. I highly recommend you pick up those games if you're interested at all. I also recommend you just play other, indie shooters like this. Play things like Ultra Kill, Dusk, a Medieval, games that really nail down the style, and especially play some of the Medieval ones, because you'll see how cool they can get with weapon designs and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, all I can really say is that I'm very excited. I'm not only excited to play this game, I'm excited to stream it, make content for it, just talk about it with people. So if you are too, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate that. I want to give a quick shout out to my buddy I'm Tired over at his channel, because he's most recently, let's see real fast. I think he just hit, he's hovering around 6K subscribers right now. He recently put out an hour-and-a-half long playthrough and video of the Resident Evil remakes. He's going to be doing more of that. He puts out incredible stuff, really just funny, highly edited gameplay content that I think is awesome. And yeah, you'll be seeing more of me soon, hopefully. I'm not sure really what the next plan is after Rift Relapse and all this other stuff. It seems like it's gonna be a very release heavy year, so just next month is Monster Hunter Wilds coming up, which I've already made the video on, but I'll definitely be playing more of that when it comes out. So I hope you tune in, hope you enjoy. If you've been enjoying any of the things you've seen on this channel, or just anything in general, and if you even have any suggestions for stuff you'd like to see, just let me know in the comments, Twitter, wherever. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you stopping by, and I'll see you very soon in the Dark Ages. Peace.
Youngblood. He's smart and he's tough, but he's got a lot to learn about survival. And the man he's gonna learn from is
lay in the cut like a puma on the prowl. The right time to get him is now. Cloud, that's the end of that. Beginning of a never-ending saga of how he gets it in like Kamagra. Cheers, here's a lager. Yours is old duels. These is from the untold rules of the old school. It's like a rule of what it do to one's medulla oblongata. Revenge of Montezuma on a blotter.
Yo, this track's off the rack,
It's
dude.
that clack, clack, boom. Like what's containing a square centimeter of the vacuum. When lava rock cool, who play the block fool? Villain get paid, laid back like chalk fool, enough to make pot drool. Wherever he at, invest wealth, impress self, check a age stat. Damn mask gets stickier than crack sweat in a corner pocket, that's game some aspect. And yet and still blow like gasket. Many ass out, no clout, no smash hit. And that's it, plan B, let the tools spark. Plan A's are shooting straight, shooting like a pool shark.